Welcome to the Crimson Dossier. Every case has a file. Not every file has answers. The Vanishing Trucker. Russia's 13-year hunt for the Orsk highway killer. Oren burg region sits in the southern Ural foothills, a vast, sparsely populated stretch of Russia where small towns are connected by long highways and unreliable public transport. Buses stop running early. Marshruki, the shared minivans that fill in the gaps, are unpredictable, especially after dark. For decades, hitchhiking along these routes wasn't seen as dangerous. It was simply how things worked. Between the middle of the 2000s and the early 2010s, something changed. Young women began vanishing. Not all at once, not in a pattern obvious enough to immediately connect, a few months apart, sometimes longer, across different towns. Daria, a pharmacy worker in her late 20s, missed her last bus home and flagged down a truck instead. Eisen, a young mother, was last heard from minutes from a dress shop, promising she'd be home in 10. Elvira, 15 years old, was on her way back from art school. Guzel, Gulson, and in June 2012, 18-year-old Olga, a recent high school graduate with plans for the future, stepped out of her house in the Orsk suburb of Pobeda to walk to a friend's and called twice along the way to say a car had stopped for her. Each time, the story was almost the same. A vehicle slows. A woman gets in, sends one last reassuring text, and then nothing. By the time investigators began connecting these cases, local volunteer groups and police estimated the number of similarly unexplained disappearances along the same highway. Corridors across more than half a decade, at close to 100. Not 100 confirmed victims of a single man. That distinction matters, and we'll come back to it. But 100 women who, for one reason or another, never made it home, on roads that, it turns out, one driver knew better than almost anyone alive. Valery Andreev was born in 1957 in a small settlement in Oren burg region. He trained as a driver, married, had 2 sons, and spent most of his adult life as a long-haul trucker, running routes through the Urals and the Volga region. By every account that existed before 2012, he was unremarkable in the best possible way. Neighbors described a devoted husband. Coworkers described a careful, rule-following driver. 15 years on the road, 3 minor tickets, not a single accident. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He was, in the words of people who thought they knew him, exactly the kind of man you'd trust to drive your daughter home. There was one habit that stood out. In hindsight, Andreev almost never took a co-driver, even on long, multi-day hauls. Unusual in an industry where companionship on the road is common. And more than once, colleagues who filled in for him noticed things in his cab that didn't quite fit. Women's underwear, jewelry, once, contraceptives. At the time, it was treated as an open secret and a joke. The quiet, faithful family man, apparently making use of roadside companionship. Nobody asked the obvious question: whose belongings were these, and where were the women who owned them? It's a detail that, looking back, sits at the center of how this case nearly didn't happen at all. The signs were there. They were simply read as something else. A private indiscretion, not a warning. The break came not from a confession, not from a witness who saw a crime, but from a description of a car. After 18-year-old Olga disappeared in June 2012, a local resident came forward. She'd seen a young woman get into a vehicle near a bus stop, large, high off the ground, white, with an unusual body shape. She didn't know makes and models, but her description was specific enough for police to narrow it down, a Sangyang Action. Across the entire region, only 11 vehicles matched. In Orsk itself, where Olga vanished, just 2. Investigators pulled phone records and found something else. Cell tower data placed Andreev's phone in the same area as Olga's on the night she disappeared. He was brought in for an interview. He said he didn't remember much about that evening. Maybe he'd been home watching television with his wife. There was no physical evidence yet. Nothing that would justify holding him. Police let him go. By the next morning, he was gone. In Andreev's personal vehicle, investigators recovered a blanket in the trunk, stained with blood. Hair, skin fragments, and fiber evidence were found throughout the car. Genetic testing later linked material recovered from the vehicle to Olga and to several other women who had vanished in previous years. But it was the garage that changed everything. Beneath a layer of plaster, fresh enough that investigators noticed it immediately, forensic teams found blood that had soaked into the concrete itself. Nearby, hammers, knives, and coils of fishing line, all bearing traces of blood. Investigators came to believe Andreev's pattern wasn't simple abduction and disposal. They believe he held some of his victims captive for a period of time before their deaths, and that the bodies were later transported and left in remote areas along the highways he knew from years of professional driving, the same roads that made him invisible. We want to be careful here, because precision matters in a case like this one, as of the most recent reporting. Russian authorities have formally linked genetic evidence from 8 women, including 1 minor, to material recovered from Andreev's property and vehicle. That is the confirmed number. The broader estimate that his roots overlap with the disappearances of as many as 100 women across Oren, burg, Samara, and Chelyabinsk regions between 2006 and 2012 remains exactly that, an estimate based on geography and timing, not confirmed forensic links. It's a number worth holding on to, but also one worth holding carefully. And it is worth restating plainly, Valery Andreev has never stood trial. He was never formally charged before he fled. Everything that follows is what investigators believe, not what a court has determined. He remains, in the eyes of the law, a suspect, the most wanted suspect in the country, but a suspect. For a man with no criminal history, no known associates in hiding, and, as far as investigators can tell, no significant money or false documents, Valery Andreev did something that should have been nearly impossible. He vanished completely for over a decade. Shortly after he fled, his wife, Tatiana, received a single phone call from an unknown number. It was brief. He told her, "Let them check first who the real killer is." Then the line went dead. She never heard from him directly again. To this day, Andreev's family maintains his innocence. His wife reportedly tore down wanted posters when she came across them in town, unable or unwilling to accept that the man she'd shared a home with for decades was the person investigators believed him to be. It's worth sitting with that for a moment, because it's one of the harder truths this case forces into the open. The people closest to a suspect are sometimes the last to see what strangers eventually piece together, and sometimes, even after the evidence is laid out, they still don't see it. That isn't necessarily denial in bad faith. It's the simple, brutal difficulty of reconciling a private person you loved with a public portrait built from forensic evidence. Search efforts spread to every region Andreev had driven through professionally: Nizhny Novgorod, Orenburg, Chelyabinsk, Samara. Wanted notices went up nationally, then internationally. In December 2019, he was placed on Interpol's most wanted list. A reward was announced, 1 million rubles from federal authorities, with regional officials adding another 500,000. And still, nothing. Over 13 years, police have logged more than 60 separate sightings of men believed to resemble Andreev. The geography is almost absurd in its spread. Voronezh, Karelia, Novosibirsk. In March 2021, a university student in Odintsovo, outside Moscow, reported that an elderly man with gold teeth and worn clothing sat beside her on a minibus and tried to start a conversation, asking where she was headed and why. She didn't think much of it until later that day, on campus, when she saw his face, or one very like it, on a wanted poster. Reports came from abroad, too. A tourist in Cuba described an elderly hotel guest who spent his days reading by the pool, speaking to no one, a man who, the tourist said, looked unsettlingly similar to the Russian fugitive. By the time hotel staff could process a formal request for information, he had already checked out. In France, a woman recalled, more than a decade after the fact, an encounter at a migrant services office in a small town, where a man introducing himself as Vladimir asked for help translating residency documents. He, too, disappeared from the trail as quickly as he'd entered it. None of these leads has ever been confirmed, and there's a reason the sightings keep multiplying instead of narrowing. Andreev, as investigators readily admit, doesn't have a distinctive face. Average height, average build, no scars or features that stand out in a crowd. Aside from gold dental crowns and a scar from an old surgery, easy enough to conceal. 13 years of aging, possible weight change, dyed hair, simple glasses, any of it could be enough to make a wanted poster useless. In May 2024, the body of an unidentified man was discovered near a lake outside the town of Akermanovka. Investigators built a forensic facial reconstruction from the skull and clothing, and, for reasons that were never fully explained publicly, didn't release it for nearly a year. When the image finally surfaced in 2025, local residents were startled by the resemblance. The reconstructed face matched Andreev's known features closely. The remains showed metal dental crowns. The age estimate, somewhere in the 60s, lined up. Even the clothing was consistent with what little was known of how Andreev might have aged into his late 60s on the run. Genetic testing was ordered. As of the most recent available reporting, the remains have still not been formally identified. It leaves the case suspended in a strange, uncomfortable space. Whatever happened to Valery Andreev? The women whose names opened this episode didn't get an ending. They got silence, a missed bus, a phone call that cut off mid-sentence. If this episode does anything, we'd rather it be this: that their names, Daria, Eisen, Elvira, Guzel, Gulson, Olga, are the ones you remember, not just the man the headlines were built around. If you have information related to this case, Russian authorities continue to take tips through their official channels. This has been the Crimson Dossier.